In the high desert of Utah's Uintah Basin, bordering the Ute Indian Reservation southeast of the small town of Ballard, sits a 512-acre cattle property that has spent the last 3 decades collecting one of the strangest reputations of any privately owned land in America. Officially, it's called Skinwalker Ranch. For nearly 60 years before that name meant anything to the public, the surrounding Uintah Basin already had its own long, quiet history of unexplained lights and sightings. A local high school science teacher named Joseph Jr. Hicks began formally cataloging residents' strange encounters as far back as the 1950s, and by the 1970s, regional newspapers were running periodic stories about a wave of UFO reports concentrated in that exact stretch of Utah desert. The land's reputation, by most accounts, goes back much further than any modern rancher's ownership record. Indigenous communities in the region had long treated the specific stretch of basin, now known as the ranch, with a wary, deliberate distance, according to oral histories collected by later researchers, not framed as a single dramatic legend, but as a generalized, long-standing unease about that particular ground that predates any American settler ever filing a deed on it. The Myers family, who quietly ranched the property from 1905 until 1987, without generating the kind of dramatic public reports the Shermans would later become known for, occupy an odd, mostly silent chapter in the property's history. Long-term residents whose own private experiences, if any, were never systematically documented the way everything that came after 1994 would be. It's also worth situating the ranch's most notorious claim: surgically precise cattle mutilations with no blood at the scene, within a much wider, decades-old American phenomenon. Reports of unexplained cattle mutilations date back to at least the 1960s and 70s across multiple western states, generating FBI attention, congressional inquiries, and a long list of competing explanations ranging from cult activity to natural predation and scavenging patterns misread by unfamiliar investigators. Skinwalker Ranch didn't invent the mutilation phenomenon. It inherited an already established, already contested category of rural American mystery and layered its own UFO and cryptid claims directly on top of it. The ranch itself entered the spotlight in 1994 when a couple named Terry and Gwen Sherman purchased the property, unaware of its reputation, and moved in with their family to run cattle. What followed, according to the Shermans' own accounts, escalated with alarming speed. They reported cattle found mutilated with what looked like surgical precision, incisions so clean that local veterinarians who examined the carcasses reportedly couldn't explain the technique or the total absence of blood at the scene. They described strange lights moving across the property at night in patterns that didn't match any aircraft, and in one of the most widely repeated stories connected to the ranch, Terry Sherman said he encountered an enormous wolf-like creature, 3 times the size of a normal wolf, that he shot directly at close range with a hunting rifle, only to watch it walk away, seemingly unharmed. The Sherman story broke into the public record through Salt Lake City's Deseret News in 1996 and was expanded in a series of investigative articles by journalist George Knapp for the Las Vegas Mercury. Within months of that publicity, Las Vegas aerospace entrepreneur Robert Bigelow bought the ranch outright from the Shermans, reportedly relieving a family that had grown genuinely frightened of their own land. Bigelow didn't buy the ranch as a tourist attraction. He established the National Institute for Discovery Science, or NIDS, a privately funded research organization, and put a team of scientists on site under round-the-clock surveillance, hoping to capture hard, repeatable evidence of whatever was actually happening there. What NIDS documented over the following years according to the researchers' own later accounts, and the 2005 book Hunt for the Skinwalker, co-written by NIDS biochemist Colm Kelleher, included unexplained radiation spikes recorded well above normal background levels in isolated, specific patches of the property, sudden and severe electromagnetic interference that disabled recording equipment and vehicle electronics at key moments, unexplained orbs of light moving in patterns inconsistent with any known aircraft, and, in one particularly striking claim, an incident on the night of March 12, 1997, in which Kelleher himself said he observed a large humanoid figure watching the research team from a nearby tree, close enough and clear enough, by his account, that it wasn't something easily dismissed as a trick of shadow or distance. The book also described a category of report that has since become one of the ranch's most discussed and least explained claims. Several NIDS researchers and earlier witnesses alike described what they experienced as brief, localized portal or tunnel phenomena, patches of sky or landscape that seemed, for a matter of seconds, to open into something else entirely, sometimes accompanied by the sudden appearance or disappearance of animals or objects nearby. No researcher connected to the ranch across any era of investigation has ever produced a photograph, recording, or physical trace of one of these events that has survived independent scrutiny. Despite years of dedicated, well-funded observation, NIDS was never able to produce the kind of hard, independently verifiable physical evidence, recovered material, conclusive photographs, biological samples that would settle the matter definitively one way or the other. The organization quietly disbanded in 2004, having spent roughly a decade on site without ever publishing a peer-reviewed paper confirming the phenomena it had set out to study. That might have been where the story ended, if not for what happened next inside a much larger, much better funded institution. In the 2000s, Bigelow's aerospace company entered into a Pentagon-funded contract known as the Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Applications Program, or AAWSAP, a real, congressionally funded Defense Intelligence Agency initiative studying unidentified aerial phenomena, later revealed publicly in December 2017 through New York Times, reporting that also exposed a related effort known as the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, or AATIP. That reporting, built substantially on the accounts of former Pentagon intelligence official Luis Elizondo and former Senate staffer Christopher Mellon, confirmed for the first time that the U.S. government had spent years and millions of dollars formally investigating UFO reports, including reports connected to military encounters, a revelation that lent an entirely new and entirely real layer of institutional credibility to a subject that had spent decades confined to tabloids and late-night cable specials. Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, the division tasked with much of that research, reportedly used Skinwalker Ranch as one of its investigative sites, folding decades of privately gathered ranch data into a program with genuine national security backing. Government records obtained through subsequent Freedom of Information Act requests confirmed the existence and scope of the AAWSAP contract, even as the specific findings tied to the ranch itself have remained largely unreleased, tangled in the same layers of classification that cover the broader Pentagon UFO program to this day. The Pentagon's own current UAP Investigative Office, established in the years following the 2017 revelations, has since published a historical review addressing decades of government involvement in the subject, but has stopped well short of confirming or denying any specific findings tied to the ranch by name. In 2016, ownership of the ranch changed hands once again, this time to Utah real estate investor, Brandon Fugal, who initially purchased the property through a shell company specifically to keep his identity private. Fugal has said publicly that he acquired the ranch as a skeptic, primarily interested in the research potential of the land, and has since described experiencing his own unexplained sighting on the property, a daytime UFO encounter witnessed alongside multiple other people that he says fundamentally changed his view. Under Fugal's ownership, the ranch's activities were dramatized for a mainstream audience through the History Channel series The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, which began airing in 2020 and brought a new team of investigators, including credentialed scientists like astrophysicist Travis Taylor, along with modern sensor arrays, ground-penetrating radar, and drone equipment onto the property for a national television audience, turning what had been a fringe research curiosity into a full cable television phenomenon that has run for multiple seasons. Skepticism has followed the ranch just as persistently as the phenomena themselves. Prominent skeptic Robert Schieffer has pointed out an uncomfortable timing detail that believers rarely address directly. The most dramatic reports of paranormal activity on the property began accumulating right around the same period the Sherman family was already in the process of trying to sell the ranch, a coincidence Schieffer has argued raises legitimate questions about motive and embellishment, even if it doesn't disprove every individual claim on its own. Critics of the modern television series have raised a related, more contemporary concern that a for-profit cable production, renewed year after year, has a direct commercial incentive to keep finding new anomalies rather than definitively closing the case one way or the other, an incentive structure that didn't exist in the same way during NIDS's quieter, privately funded years. Researchers studying the region have also pointed out, more broadly, that the Uintah Basin is an active industrial oil and gas extraction zone, and that some of the electromagnetic and radiation anomalies reported on the property may have more mundane origins in nearby drilling and pipeline infrastructure than in anything otherworldly. Psychologists studying high-strangeness locations have also noted a well-documented expectancy effect in play at sites with a fearsome reputation. Visitors who arrive already primed to expect the paranormal are measurably more likely to interpret an ordinary rustling bush or a distant light as something else entirely, and the isolation and stark, featureless terrain of the ranch itself has been cited by some researchers as conducive to exactly the kind of sensory ambiguity that fuels pareidolia, the brain's tendency to find pattern and meaning in random or minimal stimuli. There's a cultural wrinkle in the ranch's own name that rarely makes it into the popular retellings. Skinwalker is a term drawn specifically from Navajo belief, describing a malevolent witch capable of shape-shifting into animal form. But the ranch itself sits on land bordering the Ute Indian Reservation, not Navajo territory, meaning the property's most famous name was, by most accounts, borrowed from a neighboring tribe's folklore, rather than drawn from the specific traditions of the people whose reservation actually surrounds it, a detail some researchers and Ute community members have raised as its own kind of quiet appropriation layered on top of everything else. Robert Bigelow's interest in Skinwalker Ranch didn't come out of nowhere. Years before he ever purchased the property, Bigelow had already built a reputation as one of the most significant private financiers of UFO and paranormal research in the country, providing substantial funding to the Mutual UFO Network, one of the oldest and largest civilian UFO research organizations in the United States, and publicly discussing his own long-standing personal interest in questions of extraterrestrial life and life after death. For Bigelow, by his own later comments, the ranch wasn't a speculative lucrative side project. It was the culmination of decades of genuine, well-funded curiosity, finally landing on a single, contained piece of real estate where the phenomena seemed concentrated enough to actually study. The atmosphere on the property itself has become almost as central to its reputation as any individual sighting. Researchers and television crews alike have repeatedly described a specific, hard-to-articulate unease that settles over visitors almost immediately upon arrival. An isolation heightened by the flat, wind-scoured mesas surrounding the ranch on nearly every side, cut through by a single narrow dirt road, with cell service that drops out unpredictably even before anyone claims a single electromagnetic anomaly is responsible. Investigators working on the property for the History Channel series have described night vision footage catching unexplained shapes at the tree line, motion sensor equipment triggering with no corresponding visual source, and, on more than one occasion, entire camera and drone systems losing power simultaneously in a manner engineers on site couldn't immediately diagnose as ordinary battery or signal failure. What makes all of this frustratingly difficult to resolve, even for viewers approaching the case with genuine skepticism, is the sheer duration and institutional weight behind it. This isn't a single dramatic night captured on a shaky phone camera. It's 3 decades of testimony from ranch owners, hired security guards, credentialed research scientists, television production crews, and, through AAWSAP, actual federal government analysts, all reporting some version of the same underlying strangeness, even as not one of them has ever produced the kind of single, undeniable piece of physical evidence that would end the debate for good. The ranch's connection to actual U.S. federal power runs deeper and earlier than most casual retellings suggest. NIDS itself, founded by Bigelow in 1995, brought on researchers including physicist Eric Davis and famed UFO investigator Jacques Vallée in its early years, and in August of 1996, then-Senator Harry Reid of Nevada personally attended one of the organization's board meetings, where Vallée gave a presentation. Reid, who would go on to become the U.S. Senate Majority Leader, is widely credited in later reporting as the key congressional figure who quietly championed and helped secure funding for the Pentagon's UFO research efforts more than a decade later. A legislative thread that connects a private Utah ranch's board meeting in the 1990s directly to a Defense Department contract in the 2000s. More recent developments have kept that federal thread alive. According to reporting on the Pentagon's current UAP investigative body, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, or AARO, established in 2022, the office has at points acknowledged Skinwalker Ranch by name in connection with its historical review of U.S. government involvement in the UAP subject, though the office has been notably more cautious than private researchers or television producers about characterizing exactly what that involvement found. Independent, peer-reviewed confirmation of any specific anomaly recorded at the ranch has still never been published through a recognized scientific journal, a gap that remains the single most consistent complaint from scientifically minded skeptics of the case, even those who otherwise take the broader UAP subject seriously. Nearly 30 years, 3 separate owners, 1 disbanded private science institute, and 1 classified Pentagon research contract later, Skinwalker Ranch remains exactly what it was when the Shermans first called it a nightmare, a piece of land with an enormous volume of documented testimony, a near-total absence of hard public evidence, and enough institutional and governmental interest attached to it that dismissing it outright has never quite felt as easy as it should. Unlike most reputedly haunted or cursed locations, this one has a genuine paper trail running through a private aerospace fortune Basin, a named Defense Intelligence Agency contract, and Freedom of Information Act disclosures that confirm the government's involvement was real, even where its conclusions remain sealed. So, is Skinwalker Ranch the site of a genuine, still unexplained phenomenon, significant enough to draw sustained interest from a billionaire, a private science institute, and the Pentagon itself? Or is it the most elaborately funded case of expectation, industrial interference, and small-town storytelling ever assembled? And if the Defense Intelligence Agency really did find something worth studying there, why, after everything that's been declassified about the Pentagon's UFO program since 2017, is the ranch's own file still one of the pieces nobody's been allowed to see?